Welcome. Welcome to week 5 of MPAI 600 here at Georgetown University School of Continuing Studies Applied Intelligence. I know it was a lot this week, a lot to get through, so congratulations on being done with this week and being done with pretty much half the course. Just a quick announcement. I don't want to talk current events this week because I got a lot to talk about here, but think about the Saudi Arabia, Iran standoff and what happened last week and the intelligence component to that. And I'm reading new articles and new information that comes out. So just go keep on that going forward, and we'll talk about that more next week. I also add this Thursday at 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time is our Zoom session. So if you're in groups 1, 2, and 3, you will brief. Again, 20-minute PowerPoint slides, a 20 to 25-minute presentation, 5-10 minutes for questions. Group 1 will go at 9, Group 2 will go at 9:30, Group 3 will go at 10 Eastern Standard Time. If you're not in Groups 1, 2, and 3, I would recommend just watching them so you have an idea and can stimulate ideas when you're finishing up your paper this next week. So just reviewing week 4, again, the 2 case studies, Iraq WMD and 9/11. So collection failures. And again, I'm talking about failures up and down the chain. I think there's clear collection failures, everything from overly dependent on the UN inspectors for Iraq collection, and when they get kicked out, we lost a lot of our intelligence capability. And then secondly, some bad intelligence tradecraft or human tradecraft, as highlighted in the curved wall case study that I assigned. So you saw failures in collection, failures in analysis, failures between the aluminum tubes where people's biases superseded the technical analysis needed for those to rightly diagnose where those tubes came from. Negative evidence, that was critical. Everyone was asking the question, where's the Iraq WMD? Where's WMD in this picture? Nobody was asking, if Iraq had WMD, why are we not seeing many other indicators? If they had an advanced chemical weapons program, we would see importation of chemical weapons, more chemical weapons sites. We would see supply chain for chemical weapons, orders for precursor material. All those things we would have seen, but nothing came up in this case study. So there were analytical failures. There were organizational failures. I argue that you can do all the red teaming and all the negative evidence and team A, team B at the lower levels, but if George Tenet says it's a slam dunk, there's WMD in Iraq, that's the end of the ballgame. And that's a failure in organization. If you are dependent on one man for your entire intelligence picture and his biases and his motivations, then that's a failure in organization. Somehow the intelligence community wasn't set up to bring multiple channels to bear. And then the policy interface. This is the politicization of intelligence, which allowed certain amounts of intelligence to rocket up, certain bad information to rocket up the chain when it shouldn't have been brought up to that level. And that's really highlighted in the Rachel Maddow documentary. So you had, again, failures up and down the chain of command for Iraq WMD. 9/11. And the question is, was 9/11 an intelligence failure? Not all bad things that happen are intelligence failures. No one would say the El Paso shooting that happened last month was an intelligence failure, or the Virginia Beach shooting, or the Orlando shooting from 2016. So why 9/11? Why would 9/11 be categorized as an intelligence failure? And I would tend to agree that maybe 9/11 shouldn't have been an intelligence failure. However, when I saw the Nova documentary, that highlighted the intelligence failure. There were 2 known hijackers in the United States communicating with a known bin Laden safe house in Yemen, and this was picked up by elements of the intelligence community. But it wasn't shared through bureaucracy and organizational constraints to people that could actually do something to break up this plot. So that was a massive intelligence failure. 2 known people, known in the United States by our security services, but that information couldn't be actioned on to stop a terrorist threat. And the second thing I'd also say is possibly, and I'll let you debate this. Should our aviation security industry at the time, should they have known that a commercial airjet could be hijacked and used like a Tomahawk missile? And whether they should have known or that, and there was indicators. The Algerians tried to do it in 1994. Ramzi Youssef tried to do it in the 1990s, where to fly airplanes into civilian targets. Even if they didn't, they weren't 100% sure. The mitigation strategies were pretty easy. I keep talking about this emphasis, and I can't emphasize this enough. There could have been reasonable risk reduction accommodations to ensure a 9/11-like incident couldn't occur. You can reinforce 20% of cockpit doors. You could put federal air marshals. You could put the drink cart in front of the cockpit. You can make sure the crew, the airplane crew, is involved in the security of the flight, not just their normal day-to-day activities. These were small, relatively inexpensive, reasonable accommodations that could have prevented a 9/11-like incident. Certainly inexpensive compared to everything we've done since 9/11. So, was 9/11 intelligence failure? Again, I'll let you decide, but these are just some of my thoughts. Another instance, unfortunately you couldn't see the National Geographic, but something that's been made is, George Bush was briefed, bin Laden determined to attack in the U.S., and he was briefed before 9/11. And he gets a lot of criticism for it, and I don't think that's very fair. Something like this is a very vague intelligence analysis that I don't think a policymaker can action. In fact, I would ask, if you're going to brief something like that, whether it's to a policymaker, a military leader, business leader, something is vague, you should be prepared to answer the next question: what do you want me to do about it? So if George Bush, prior to 9/11, and you brief him this, and he says, okay, what do you want me to do? You better have reasonable risk reduction measures in your back pocket in case he asks that. So he can make a decision. And again, I can't emphasize that reasonable risk reduction measure. Bring that up in your paper. Hint, hint, comma, comma, emphasis. If you're going to point out intelligence failures in whether confessions or Yom Kippur War or whatever, you also have to say, okay, what decisions could have been made that would have reverted disaster? And then organizational issues, I highlighted this just a second ago. We had information at the NSA, but because of a combination of bureaucratic rules about classification, antipathy, probably by the NSA folks, and our federalist society, our federalist government, where information is collected at the federal level, but it's not disseminated down to local law enforcement. We couldn't action it. Again, organizational issues prevented that. And then I always ask, where along the chain could the federal and state government have prevented 9/11? I'll let you decide. But is it way back in the 1990s when we let Afghanistan become a refuge for Osama bin Laden and others? Or is it a little bit closer to home where we say, if we had a TSA at the time looking for more aggressively for knives and other things, that's where 9/11 could have been prevented? Or is it somewhere in between? I'll let you decide going forward, but that could be a point on the paper. So paper 2. I know a lot of people are probably thinking about this as we go forward. It's strategic paper. Again, focus on the previous case studies we talked about. Do not use the post 9/11 case studies we're talking about week 5. Focus on weeks 1 through 4 case studies. Can't emphasize it enough. So I ask, you can choose one of the case studies and go in depth, or you can choose an issue that affects multiple case studies and show that this is a continuing problem. And I'll talk about some of those issues right now. So again, when the intelligence failure happens, there's failures in collection. Do you think this is the primary failure going forward? In Pearl Harbor, the lack of collection on aircraft carriers. Again, these are just some examples. Yom Kippur War, over-reliance on the human part. In the Iraq War, the curveball case study that I just mentioned, these were all failures in collection. And was whatever case study you're going to use, was collection the major issue that resulted in the failure? Failures in analysis. The Pearl Harbor case study, again, really showed that the inability or you had all those indicators of potential strike at Pearl Harbor, but they were essentially ignored. In the confessions, you had confirmation bias. Again, a key point that is relative not just in the confessions, but at other case studies as well. In Iraq WMD, you had the massive groupthink, particularly to those aluminum tubes that I just discussed, or negative evidence, or any of the other analytical failures in analysis that I talked about earlier. And then you had politicization, Iraq WMD, talked about that enough, the confessions. That was, again, the arguably politicization forced Detective Ford and others to look for a confession and get a conviction. And then 9/11, where, again, the policy, the intel community might have had information on it, but they couldn't get the policy community to make decisions to mitigate risk. These are, again, issues of politicization or policy interference, or policy interface. Is this where the intelligence failures occurred? And then finally, organization. I talked about 9/11 NSA documentary. I talked about the Pearl Harbor in the previous lecture, where information was collected at the federal level, but it was not disseminated down to the military commanders. That's a failure in organization. The fusion centers, where information should be pushed down to the lowest level, those are designed to prevent a 9/11, and the question is, would those have stopped a 9/11-like terrorist attack? Better organization, better communication vertically, as was mentioned in the short piece that you guys saw. So for paper 2, please choose a case study and discuss some of these points, or choose an issue, failure analysis, negative evidence, failures in collection, what have you, and talk about how the cases reflected that failure. But I can't emphasize the following. I can't emphasize enough the following. 1, do not give me a laundry list. I just gave you a laundry list here. I don't want your paper organized like this. I want you to choose what you think are the most important aspects and go in depth on those issues. Don't just give me 15 reasons why 9/11 happened or 15 reasons why the Yom Kippur happened. That is not what I'm looking for. So I can't emphasize that enough. So choose. 2, make sure you have reasonable risk mitigation. There was a decision point that could have happened in any of these case studies, and they could have made reasonable decisions that would have prevented a catastrophe, whether in the confessions or in the 9/11 case study or what have you. There had to have been a reasonable case made. So those are the 2 points I really want you to bring out in these papers. Can't emphasize that enough. Papers and the briefings. Okay, so and then week 5, we have no let up. That's just the way this course is. You have to write your paper and do your briefing and do the week 5 readings and case studies. So week 5 looks at the counterterrorism case studies, the post 9/11 counterterrorism case studies. Fort Hood, underwear bomber, Boston, European Union. You have the readings about the Fort Hood shooting, the Boston bombing, and then the documentary on the Christmas Day bomber and the EU terrorism. Please, again, try and at least hit the high points for a lot of these readings. They're relevant for the final. They're relevant for, obviously, the discussion sections. And as you're going through them, ask, why do we still have these failures? So, a lot this week. I look forward to Thursday. I'll send out the Zoom link later on this week. And if there's questions or issues, again, I am available for emails. As you know, I'm pretty responsive on emails. I'm available if you want to do a phone call. I've had a couple of times I've had hard time connecting with some one or two of you on over the phone. I apologize, but I'm willing to talk this week to try and knock that out as well. And again, if you have questions or issues, don't hesitate to ask.